Hi, this is Gary Block, and welcome back to, well, you see it, your Little Falls Scene. A little bit of a history. We're doing rebroadcast of programs we did for a number of years. Back a number of years ago, about 2007, there were four guys here in Little Falls who got together at the local bakery and they discussed Little Falls. And the thought was, let's get these guys together. Gary Block will moderate it. And we sat down in the studio and we had some fun talking about Little Falls because these guys were a big part of the history of Little Falls. We had four gentlemen. We had Hub Zivoloski, Bodie Larson, and two brothers, Les and Russ Sod. And it was such a joy doing this program with them. We can't let this program just go away. It's a bit of history about Little Falls, and we had so many people who filled in over the years. We talked about Hennepin Paper. We talked about where I was at for many years, the local radio station. We talked about just baseball, anything that pertained to Little Falls, we talked about it. We had fun with it. And we're rebroadcasting some of those old programs. And thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy them here on Great River TV. This is the Little Falls Scene. I'm Gary Block, and we have quite a group of people with us, and it's been a while since we've had a chance to get together. Hub Zivoloski's with us, Bodie Larson, and for the first time, Bud Zivoloski is with us. And to introduce everybody to the audience, tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll start with you, Hub.
Born and raised here, went into the service and been living here the rest of my life. Ran a nursing home, worked at Camp Ripon, played baseball, and I'm a storyteller.
Bodie?
Well, like Hub, born and raised here. Graduated from high school here. Went to college down in the Twin Cities and went to work for a paper company temporarily for 42 years and 8 months and retired about 15 years ago.
And Bud?
Well, I was born here, went to high school here, graduated in 1943 and joined the Navy. And after we got out, I spent about 11 years in Little Falls working for a dry cleaners. Then we bought our own dry cleaning shop in Long Prairie. And we went to Moorhead, and we ended up coming back home and doing our last stint on the West Side Dry Cleaners. And played ball with Hubert,
yes.
with the Red Sox, and had a good time.
Well, the purpose of our show, for those who haven't seen it before, is to really just sit here and talk, reminisce, share some stories. And as you can tell from Hub, he needs to finish the Long John over there yet, which you'll see him do during the program.
Yeah.
I'll wait till Bud starts talking, and then I'll munch into it.
Well, speaking of food,
This came from the bakery, by the way.
Pete and Joyce.
Yeah, Pete and Joy.
Let's talk about grocery stores in Little Falls. And boy, if anybody has an experience with grocery stores, Hub and Bud both do. Your father owned a grocery store. Tell us where it was.
Well, we'll back up a few years. My dad was born and raised in Philadelphia, and my grandfather had a grocery store there. Grandma had an asthma problem, and the doctor said, you got to get out of here, because everybody was heating with coal. She couldn't handle that. Go out in the country. So my great uncle had a place between Little Falls and Sobieski. Victor Zivoloski is here.
Yes, remember Victor
Everybody
well.
knows Victor. Anyway, they bought 80 acres next door. My dad and a couple of brothers and Grandma came and they built a farm next door to Victor's daddy. And then the rest of the family moved out. Well, 80 acres did not support a big family, so when the kids grew up, then they had to do something else. So Dad started a grocery store in Little Falls, and Bud, you can pick it up from there because I don't remember when he was on 3rd Street.
Well, he started on 3rd Street with a small grocery store.
About a block from the Silver Treat.
And he ended up on 2nd Street. But I'll have to tell you a little story about my grandparents lived in, my grandfather and his brother had a meat market in Philadelphia. And when, after the World War II was over, I went up to the canal and ended up with our ship in Washington, D.C. Well, Dad had a brother there, and he wanted to see. And while he was there, he took back to Philadelphia, to his own hometown. And the meat market that my grandfather and his brother owned was still operating. And Dad says, what in the world did you ever leave a good business like that and come out and farm in Sobieski on the dirt and the sand?
Our sister Mary was also, she was stationed in D.C. and she was in the Waves,
Yeah.
so she was part of that too.
She was
wasn't
part
she?
of that too.
Not-
But Dad wasn't a farmer. And he said they left such a good business. The meat market that Grandpa ran was still going, operating in Philadelphia.
So the first grocery store was on 3rd
Third.
Street Southwest. Did your father put a new building up? Had somebody had a business there before?
Yeah, Karnowski's had the business and he must have rented from him.
I think so.
What was the old man's name? He was...
Jake.
Oh, Jake, yeah, but then the son that was the chief of police.
Oh, that was John.
John, yeah. Mhm. So, and they lived right next door. There were two-story buildings, the old brickyard where they made the bricks. There was that yellow brick. There were two-story buildings across the avenue from each other. And Karnowski's lived in one, and the other was the grocery store, which they turned into an apartment. Which Gene Valentine lived in
He lived
where the grocery
upstairs.
store was.
Yeah.
No, he lived downstairs after Dad left.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So your dad opened up the grocery store about what year? Do you remember?
It's got to be in the late 30s, middle 30s probably in there. Yeah.
So what was
Probably-
that? What was the first grocery store like? Tell us your remembrances about the grocery store, the first one now.
Bud would remember. I don't remember that
Okay.
one.
Well, it was just staple grocery. They didn't have much fresh vegetables except potatoes.
Okay.
Because I remember down in the basement of that, Dad would buy potatoes in the fall and they would stay there through the winter and selling
Okay.
potatoes. And that was about the only, and no frozen foods. Nobody had a
Sure.
freezer.
Frozen. You didn't even have Isobox then.
It was mostly staple groceries.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you worked in the grocery store, Bud?
Off and on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now your dad moved one block.
Yeah.
What was the
one-
reasoning for that?
We have no idea.
No idea why.
No
Maybe they
idea why.
decided to close it
a
up.
little bit
but-
bigger building probably, and
Okay.
things were still pretty good as far as the economy went at that point.
And both businesses were bigger than the neighborhood stores. He was more next side. Well, he did the same as the East Side Stiegel's and those other stores downtown were no bigger.
And it was called Zivoloski's?
Mike's
Mike's?
Gross.
Mike's Grocery.
Mike's Grocery. Yeah.
Okay.
I went to Our Lady of Lourdes School, which was about 2 blocks from there, and in the wintertime, we had an hour off and go home, but I would stop into the grocery store, and Dad'd say, "What do you want for lunch today?" Well, Campbell's soup, you know, I was at that Campbell. He had this little, remember that little kerosene stove?
Yes,
He would heat it up
definitely.
on that. And the crackers, and then right in the middle of the grocery store, there was the furnace was down in the basement, and it was just gravity fed, just one outlet in the whole building. And the penny candy was in a square area, in that general area. And then he'd say, okay, after lunch, he'd say, okay, take what you can have 4 pieces of penny candy. Well, that was about a half-hour choice because there was so much candy, and I can still remember that. And those were all good memories. And I think we talked last time about the old gas pumps where you had to pump the thing
Right.
up. Well, my dad had one of them
Yes.
out in front, and I told a story about the neighbor. He had a shoe repair shop sign out in front. It was just a small building, and he lived there. And I noticed my dad would say, go out and pump up 8 gallons or so. And these guys would always go in there, and geez, they were in there a long time. It was the same 3-4 guys. And they'd come out, and I finally asked my dad, and I was about 7 years old, I said, "Dad, those guys must have an awful lot of shoe repair needed." You know, I said, "The same guys go in there." My dad laughed. He said, "There's a little drinking going on in the basement. That was probably moonshine."
I'm sure.
And that would have to be about 1937.
So what happened to the building on 3rd Street? Obviously, it's not there anymore. You
What?
remember what happened
I know.
to it?
It got torn
disagree on
down
this,
and a
but-
new house was built.
Now, we should tell our viewers, this is what's interesting about having 2 brothers, because as we share stories, as we did before we went on the air today, both have different recollections, and they sometimes, Bodie, they don't agree with each other, and we'll find this out today.
And that's why Bodie's sitting in
Between the two of you.
No.
So what happened to the building? What are both of you both have differing opinions on that?
You tell your side and I'll tell mine.
Well, I think it was used for apartments for a while, but I remember it got torn down, and a friend of ours built a home there. And it's on
What?
maybe
We're
200
talking about the
3rd
grocery
Street
store.
Southwest.
That
What?
building's still there.
No, the one on
On
3rd Street.
he's
Oh,
talking
3rd
about.
Street.
see?
Oh, yeah, all right. Excuse me, but you went farther back there.
Bodie, you're going to have to separate them.
Yeah, no, the building got
Calm
torn
down,
down,
fellas,
and,
calm
and
down.
they a friend of mine's mother built a new home and it's still there. Yeah.
Right. And that's what you remember too?
Yeah, I thought he was talking about 3rd Street.
The other one.
No,
Yeah, or 2nd Street,
Yeah.
yeah.
And ironically,
So far, we're okay.
I owned a home just to the, I have to think here, to the south of where your father's grocery store is, with the old Moldy House.
yeah.
So, small world sometimes.
On 3rd, yeah.
On 3rd. So you move over to 2nd Street. You didn't have gas pumps on 3rd Street, right? You got them on 2nd Street now.
Yeah,
What was the price of gas? Any thoughts?
probably about 15 cents.
Okay.
When we had the gas station during the war, which would be, I think you got in there about 42, 43, bud, because you weren't in the service yet.
No, I wasn't.
Anyway,
yet.
the gas price was 20.5 a gallon, and it stayed that way all the way through the World War II and a few years after. And then I think it went up to 25 and stayed there for a long time.
What was the brand of gas?
Standard Oil.
It
The
was.
Big
Yeah,
time
Standard Oil.
So,
I remember once after Bud was gone, and the serviceman that came out of Standard Oil was not probably Bud's age, and he and I could identify, and they came out with this big campaign about this improvement in the gasoline, remove the goo, improve the go. Had big signs they put up and all over the place, and geez, what did they do to the gas? He said nothing. From that day on, I didn't believe advertising.
That was cute.
I'm glad it's a nonprofit station.
there were a lot of family grocery stores on both sides of the river. What kind of person did it take to run a family grocery store? What was your father like?
Uh-oh. This was the potential priest in the family, so he could do no wrong.
Yeah.
I was the left-handed, what did he call me, the black sheep. So we
Okay.
had different
Idiots,
opinions of my dad.
All right.
Yeah. Well,
But it took a special kind of person to run a grocery store, didn't it?
He's very outgoing.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Nice Guy.
well, he loved to talk, and he loved people. And
Except his son.
one thing about the small grocery stores, they were open in evenings and weekends, Saturday night and all day Sunday, where all the major stores would close 6 o'clock during the week and no open on Sundays. And that's where most of the small people stayed in business, because they did a lot of business on the weekends. So
You're,
that was about the short and long of it.
And the grocery store also offered credit, didn't it?
Yeah.
That must
Therein
have-
lies the problem he had in the grocery store. Bud disagrees with this, but he bought a two-story wood building between right west of the West Side Bar, and it must have been 38 or do you remember when he went out of? Anyway, he had so much credit on the books because times were really hard and people weren't paying their bill, so he had no cash to restock. So he made a deal with the Simonette brothers that they would buy the building. My dad bought it for $900 and he sold it for $900. They wanted to put in a second-hand furniture store in there, and they said he could run it. So that's what he did. My dad's one of his problems, probably as big of them, he enjoyed drinking, and he was always he was too close to the West Side Bar, and he went in there too often, and customers would come in the store, and they didn't do well. Simonettes decided to close the store, but they were gentlemen enough. They brought my dad over to the east side and worked in the big store. Well, my dad was on the city council, and there were some volatile subjects, and my dad had a voice that would, if he yelled, he could open those doors over there. I mean, the kids in the neighborhood said, "What was your dad mad about last night?" I said, No, he wasn't mad last night. Geez, we could hear him a block away. And I'm not kidding, right? He had this loud voice, mainly because I figured it out that his dad could not speak English, my grandfather, and he was hard of hearing. So my dad communicated with him all the time, and I think he developed that strong voice. Okay? So, now I lost, where was I going with this? So people would come in and start arguing with my dad about city business, and Simonette's ran that furniture store like they ran their funeral home. Very quiet, genuflect when you come in, and everything was so neat and quiet, and you walk, there's my dad with that booming voice arguing with somebody. So they put him out working on linoleums and things like that. Well, he had an injury in World War I with his knee. The knee went out. He went to the Veterans Hospital. He came back, and he opened a gas station. So that was kind of what was the question? I do digress, do I not?
We were talking about credit.
Yeah. Anyway, the credit, yeah. And when my dad died, we were looking through some things to write an obituary, and I found those little books, where they used to have the credit.
Yeah.
There was a slip that what do you call that? The copy.
Receipt.
The copies
Oh,
were
okay.
gone, and he kept those things all those years. And I remember seeing him. He had his desk at home, and he would look at those things, and he would just about cry because he lost his grocery business, and he, like Bud said, he loved that. And I said, he saved those things all those years, because I can remember one time I said, Dad, why don't you just throw them away? It's history. We're 20, 30 years later, and he's still looking at they were still there when he died. And that was what, about, I was still working I was running the nursing home then, so it must have been around 70, 71.
About in there.
Okay, I'm done.
So as he's selling used furniture, the family still had the grocery store, right?
Oh, yeah.
For a short while.
Okay.
But everything he made went into the grocery store to pay. The wholesalers would, everything that came from like Nash Finch, for one, you pay it when I bring it, the wholesale groceries. Mm-hmm. He couldn't charge to them, but he charged to the customers of his. So all of a sudden he said, the store is closing, take everything home that's left, and he kept his job.
Another grocery store never went into that building again,
No.
did it?
No.
It turned into an apartment building.
But
Okay.
do you know who owned that place? I had no idea who owned it. Masog didn't, did he?
I don't know, I
No,
can't
I
say.
don't remember either.
Did your father, that was the only gas station he had? Did he have any other gas stations here in town? That was it? There were a lot of gas stations in Little Falls during that era, wasn't there?
That between 40 and 50, I think I figured out there was either 23 or 24
In town?
in town,
Right.
in the city limits. Because you had Highway 10 went right to Bank Square, you had 27 going from Pierce to Long Prairie, and you had 371 starting there. So everybody, you could talk to anybody from Rochester or any place and say, where are you from? Little Falls. Oh yeah, we went to that place. Yeah, we had to back up to Fort Ripley, because on a weekend it was really terrible.
But it was the place to stop to fill up again, wasn't it?
And at that point, if they came 100 miles or so, the cars, I don't know, they were getting 17, 18 miles to a gallon, and they were probably going on another 40, 50 miles, so they would gas up. It was a perfect place to gas up.
Right.
But there
Of course,
was,
by the time they got to your father's place, they probably had made
they
a
were
choice
filled
already.
up, so we sat there and daydreamed a lot.
Okay.
And we didn't have an inside hoist, so we couldn't service cars in the wintertime, so it was a real struggle.
Highway 10 would have run by the Royal Cafe then, so what
You
was
bet.
the Royal
Yeah.
Cafe like on
Take a right.
a Friday
Yeah.
night?
You bet,
Yep.
yeah.
Busy place on a Friday night?
Very, very busy.
It was called the Jefferson Highway, and there was Trutwins owned a gas station and a little eating place and called Jefferson Highway Garage. Remember?
Right.
And they also were the Terraplane dealers, or the Terraplane was made by Hudson.
Hudson
Yeah.
Terraplane.
They were the Hudson franchise, and they were good friends. And one of the daughters was in my class, and one was a couple years behind.
Bodie, these guys caught me off guard the other day because we were talking what are we going to do for the program today, and one of the two brothers made the comment, did you realize they used to do some iron mining in Little Falls? And we mentioned this before we went in the air today, and Bodie's comment was, well, I remember that up in Randall, right?
Randall, yes, Randall, iron mining in Randall in the open pit mine Probably sometime in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. I think it was run by people out of Crosby,
Okay.
the iron on the people from the Cuyuna Range. And they operated for a few years. You fellows must remember that. There was a spur, railroad spur, that hooked into the main line. And then it finally ran out of gas, just a little ways north of Randall.
Well, little did we know there was.
North and east. I think it was off that.
Right off of
Number one?
Right off of number one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. I never did see that. I never drove in there. But it had to be a little later because I was working at Camp Ripley and everybody in Randall was pretty excited about that. So it had to be somewhere after 53 that they discovered and then they started. But
Started mining.
yeah,
Well, Bud, how about iron mining in Little Falls?
Bud can start that one.
Bud, few people know about this, and it was right on the west side, wasn't
Well,
it?
my dad's grocery store, the second one he had was on Number Drive. And right across the street was an open, just a sand lot. The creamery was on
North.
one side, and there was Minnesota Power owned the building on the other one. And us kids used to go through, we'd take a shortcut over to the bridge through there, and accidentally somebody was walking and kicked up a chunk of scrap iron, kind of flat, and scrap iron paid a good price in those days. And
35 cents a 100 pounds.
pretty soon we start picking up little scrap iron because we had a scrap iron dealer in town, and Hub and I would
dinner.
take our wagon and we'd fill it up and we'd run it over there, and pretty soon other people came and all of a sudden we had the whole town there digging for it. Because, well, it was during the Depression, and a nickel meant a lot in those days. Even today, people wouldn't think that that's worth anything, but everybody did. They were sitting there with rakes and shovels and pickaxes and digging into the ground, and I think it made headlines in the transcript. Somewhere there's a picture
I
of
think
all
the
of this
Minneapolis
going
picked
on.
up on this, the iron mine on West Side Little Falls. I mean,
It was really
we would kind of wait for a rainstorm, and then the topsoil would come off, and there'd be another layer of that stuff. We had no idea because what would
It had
that
to
would
be a foundry
Okay.
way
had
back
been there
when.
and closed up, and they just threw covered it up, and I don't
That's
even know
what-
who owned the land. But anyway, somebody said, well, we can't wait for rain all the time, so somebody started digging,
Yeah.
and pretty soon the adults were there, and they could have dug the size of a swimming pool in there.
Yeah. We're looking at about the 40s, late
Okay.
30s or 40s.
Yeah.
And,
At that
was
time,
really something.
iron was 35 cents a 100 pounds, and then it went up to a dollar for 100 pounds during the war. So, well, that was we really made money then.
yes.
See, we East Siders weren't aware of this mining going on
The
the west side.
prosperity that was going on across
Right,
the river. They
exactly.
never
We
shared
weren't
that.
in there. It was dangerous to go on. If you're East Sider, it was dangerous to go
Right
on the west
on.
side.
You needed permission to come over.
Right, right. It needed
And
a
we weren't
permit.
going to share that bonanza with anybody from the east side.
No.
You couldn't have a paper boy come over and deliver papers if he lived on the east side. He'd never get home alive. I mean, somebody would beat the crap out. And vice versa. If a west sider tried to sell newspapers on the east side, you got it too.
How did that get started?
The river.
Well, I know that, but
It was two separate towns.
Yeah, two
there
separate
was such a
towns, right.
rivalry between the two sides.
It really was.
Yeah, there really was. Yeah.
Bud would probably remember because it kind of died down after I grew up.
Yeah, earlier we were like a little place all over the Berlin on the west side. We had everything we needed over there too.
So you didn't need
A
the
couple
bridge.
of grocery stores. We had gas stations. We had a clothing store right on the corner of where A1 Appliance is right now.
Okay.
That was
Maysog's.
that was a Maysog's mint. It was a men's store, and then we had what was the name of that empty lot, that first kind of a chain store that came, Pomida or
Oh, yeah.
over there by Brenny's.
Well,
Pomida.
It's
Yeah.
where the
Pomida,
fishing museum is
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And we had everything on the west side. We didn't have to go to the east side. We had grocery stores, and we had a dairy, ice cream stores, and we even had soft serve. They didn't call it Dairy Queen. They had so we had everything we needed
And
over
most
there.
of the power and light company stuff were on the west side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were in good shape?
Yeah, the problem was we only had 2 representatives on the city council, and the east side had the alderman at large and 4 council members. So they made all the decisions based on the businesses on the east side. So the west side was sort of the poor part of town.
But we did have 2 parks.
Yeah.
We had Pine Grove and Lindbergh's Park.
and that-
Yeah,
But
that's
we
right.
did let
If they
the
could
East
have moved
Siders.
them, they would have moved them.
Yeah,
Right.
but we did let the East Siders come over to enjoy our park.
If we were escorted, right.
You know, I go into Our Lady of Lourdes Church and I look at that magnificent place, and it boggles my mind, and I wish that I had asked, I wish I was better terms with my dad and could have found the history of that church, but I look at it and I say, I didn't know 2 people on the west side that could scrape 2 dimes together. How did they build
less
that
build that.
magnificent church? And why did they have another Polish church on the south end up on 7th Street where Charlie Martin used to live?
St. Adalbert's.
Yeah.
St. Albert's,
St.
yeah.
Albert's,
And
yeah.
I never understood that, how they could afford to build those. My mother said that they had a group that would go to Long Prairie and Sauk Center and all those places, put on shows and that, and they would charge money. But I said, that might have paid for 1 pew. How did you get the rest of the bill? I know that all these people were homegrown carpenters, and that the church members did a lot of work on the church. But when you look at the magnificence of that building, there had to be some professionals that came in, and some of that stuff had to have been pre-made and brought in.
It was,
Just, yeah.
I'm sure.
Do you know any more about it, Bud?
That's about it.
Yeah.
I do have an album from the church. I have a Laying of the Cornerstone, and Father Mushel was a good friend of my dad. They claim he was my godfather when I was born. And
He wanted you to be a priest.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I have a picture of the insides of the church before it was ever used. So I still have that, and I'm going to donate that to the
And
church.
you have the original copy.
Yes,
He gave it to you.
Yeah, nobody else has
My
copies
dad
of it
had that
either.
in a special drawer, and
Yeah.
he hid it.
I bet.
Talked to my mother about that
Yeah.
once, and she said, Father Mushel, what was the name of that movie? Sidney Poitier built that chapel for them German nuns.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that movie?
Yes, I remember the movie.
Lilies in the Field?
Lilies of
Yeah.
the Field.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
that
the
was my
one.
theme for
That's it.
getting building my chapel off of at the Lutheran home. I used that as my theme. But my mother, I asked her about it, and she said that Father Mushel must have really worked hard to get that built, and he was a very determined, hardcore kind of guy. And she said he called her up the day that they were going to dedicate the church, and he said, Martha, that was her name, would you come and go up in the choir loft and sing this particular Polish song for him before it was dedicated? So my mother went up into the church and into the choir loft, and she sang that, and you know the song, they always sing it, that was his favorite. And he sat in the front row, and she sang that song for him. So
I think
she sang the first song in the church.
Sedecka Matsko.
Bingo.
Yep.
Yeah, whatever the heck that means.
Oh, Holy Mother.
Okay.
And it reminded me so much of Sidney Poitier sitting in there and then walking out before the church was dedicated. He did the same thing. So she got to sing the first song in church.
We do that song when there's a funeral. We sing part of it in Polish, and then we do the English words for the people that don't understand it. And you have a lot of tears in the audience, especially some of the old timers that remember, going way back, whereas mostly Polish people that belong to Our Lady of Lourdes.
Well, Bull, we'll go from, this is the perfect segue, guys, going from musical talents and the Zivoloski family talents. The Zivoloski family band, what's the history in this? Tell me the story on this.
Well, my sister Mary learned piano at a very young age, and she did a lot of entertaining all around. Dad played the violin, Mother played the piano, and I played guitar and trumpets. And so we kind of formed a family band.
I didn't hear Hub's name mentioned.
No. Hub
He was a ball player.
Hub had a very good voice, but he wasn't really a band player. So we played, I know, at the Pine Edge Inn, and upstairs above, I don't know if anybody remembers the old Seabuck building where all the Muriels are on the west side,
Yep.
just the west of the bridge.
West Broadway.
There was a dance hall upstairs, and I remember playing there quite a bit. And we had a few gigs in Brainerd. $3 a night, which was still a lot of money. We're
was.
talking about maybe 1940, 39, 40, where men were working for $1 a day. And we were very fortunate that we could do this.
So was it your mother and dad's idea to share these
Dad
talents?
was a big ham.
Okay.
He would go any place with
Mom
his fiddle.
was too.
Yeah. We did a lot of charity. Part of it was at the
VA.
VA in St. Cloud. We did 2 shows a year, and the whole family would go down. And Hub was always our
MC.
MC.
So you were involved in it that way.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
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 I will say he's a very good master of ceremonies. I don't care which subject
Full
we
of
were
bull.
on. Yeah, he was full of bull.
So this was like the Little
Thanks,
Falls
brother.
version of the Osmond
That's the
family.
first,
Right.
That's the first compliment since I hit the home run in Ramsey. I hit the home run. This was a close game, and you got to come up and hit 2. And then Ronnie Delahunt hit 1, and the score went to 17. And then Bud could see the headlines. Bud hits his home run, you know. Never mind. I digress.
Well, Bud talks about the VA hospital, and I know, Hub, you had told me that you guys used the VA hospital. This was kind of your rehearsal place.
That was our rehearsal place. Yeah.
Why?
Because we would do 2 shows. The first show, they were the guys that were really what was that? They had the poisoning.
Yeah,
I forget what they called it, but
I know what.
they were on heavy medication, and they would say the show can only last 45 minutes. We got to get them out of there because their medication starts running out, and with a room full of them, there's no way they could control them if they went out of control.
Okay.
My dad never understood that, and I can remember 45 minutes was up. No matter where we were in the show, it's over with. Well, we closed the curtains. My dad goes out and he starts entertaining them again. And I had to grab him and bring him back and try to explain. So after a while, we finally decided we would work the show, time it so that my dad got all his little things in before the 45 minutes were up. The second show could go for 2 hours, but we did all our rehearsing. I used to do voice impressions, and we brought Dwayne Plouffe along. He did Jerry Lewis better than Jerry Lewis, and I could do a little of Dean Martin. So we had this routine we did. And I remember, who was the girl that had the ballet? Do you remember her name? Her dad worked at he was a mutual drugstore. He was a whatever you call him, pharmacist. Do you remember? The daughter. Anyway, she came out. We'd bring anybody that we could get to go. And she brought all her little ballet girls, and they do this dance. And we got my dad out, and he was a big, heavy guy. But he was so light on his feet for about 5 minutes, and you had to call 911. But we got him in his long underwear, and she's out there balleting, facing the audience, and my dad comes on behind, and he's mimicking. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I mean, I don't think I could come out and MC after he got done with that show. And we never told her he was going to do this, and she's wondering why everybody was laughing. But he was sensational. And then I'd tell jokes, and they didn't go over at all. And I realized that sight gags would work for him. So what we did was we did sight gags. Johnson & Johnson used to do the sight gags in movies. Mm-hmm. So we did this thing where Dwayne comes out with this little flower. He says, "Paging Mrs. Snodgrass." Nobody out there in the audience. Walked by, and I'm emceeing at the time. A little later, he'd come up, and we had a telescope, so the next time was a little bit bigger. Well, at the end of the show, God, it was right up to the ceiling. He's dragging that thing out. He's dragging that thing out, paging Mrs. Snodgrass. One guy said, "Here," and I thought, oh, he killed the whole joke. And Dwayne was so nervous backstage, but on stage, he was a total different person. And he said, "Which Mrs. Snodgrass?" And the guy said, "Steve, no, wrong one," and off. And he goes, I said, he and I could have sat for hours and said, what can go wrong with this gig? You know? But he was good. Dwayne he was very special.
And the band did some traveling. You went up to Lutsen.
Yeah, we were up at Lutsen.
Tell us about
Yeah.
that. You did a
Well,
2-hour
that
show.
was Hub's job. We had the family though.
Yeah, it was at that point we had Bud, Mary, Joanne, and I, and we would do an hour show, and we would Mary and Joanne and I would sing trio. Bud and I did country western together. I would solo, do voice impressions, tell jokes. We had Dwayne Plouffe with us, and we did our Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis routine. So Lutzen's is on this side of Grand Marais. And we had to go by Lutzen's. I'd never been there. Went by Lutzen's before we went to Grand Marais, where they had made accommodations for us. So we went inside. This huge, beautiful place, grand piano, and we're in there with our little Mickey Mouse amplifiers. And oh my God! And a friend of ours that I had worked with had made the arrangements. This was a regional Lions convention. Yeah,
right.
all the Ritzies from Duluth were there.
And Canada.
And Canada, yeah. So we had the part of the afternoon. That's the only time I've ever been nervous. I was so nervous because I thought we're going to blow our minds. So we get on there. They had their meal, and different people were talking, and they were telling jokes. Oh, those are 10 times funnier than anything I've got. I was almost totaled out on this, but it all worked out. We did a show, and then at midnight we did another show. We just ad-libbed the second one. And during this thing, there was a lady there, a little short little lady. They told us that her husband owned a shipping company out of Duluth, so she was boiling with money. She said, I always wanted to play the drums, because we got very informal on these things. It wasn't like a normal dance job, because during the what they call that, midnight intermission kind of thing,
right.
I didn't drink, and Mary didn't drink, and so in high school, I learned the scale on the saxophone. But I had ear problems, and blowing a horn brought on those earaches. But I did know the scale. So I said, Mary, sit down and just play boogie woogie. So she started playing boogie woogie, and I picked up my sister's saxophone, knew the scale. I said, play in the key I'm in, and we started that. And some guy came in, can I play the drums? Yeah, he came in and played we had a jam session during that intermission thing, and we added that to our little act, and it was kind of a special group. But anyway, this little lady said, can I play the drums? And yeah, okay, so I took a break. She sat down. Her drink fell into the amplifier.
Blew out the tubes.
Your amplifier?
Yes.
Oh, he was mad at me. Oh, why did you let that old lady? And so I thought, how am I going to get her out of there? So Dwayne didn't have, Bluffy, handsome young single guy, he didn't have anything to do. I said, grab that lady and take her out and dance. I do whatever you have to do to get her away from the dance band. And the last time I saw her, they came by bus. The bus driver had her over his shoulder carrying her out to the bus.
I remember that.
Yeah, it turned out to be such a wild party, and I was so glad because my buddy wasn't embarrassed by these people that he had hired.
So the family band lasted for how long? Do you remember?
Well, with my mother and dad, shortly about when the war was over.
Okay.
Well, I think we played maybe a year. Pa would pick up some jobs, and we'd fill in. But most of us were playing with other bands. I was playing I started with C. Buck and the Rejuvenators. If anybody remembers Cliff Buck from the furniture store on the west side.
It's a name we hear a lot about.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
What kind of guy was he? I remember. I just
He
one of
was-
those things I
He was
vaguely
one
remember.
of a kind.
Remember the furniture store?
He'd give away everything. He was a very, very generous person. And I got out of service in 1946, and I had just a regular guitar, and I wanted to buy an electric guitar. So he had a music store in his furniture store. And Joe, I don't know if anybody knows Joe Johnson. He worked for him.
Okay.
And
Everybody knows
another
Joe
person
Johnson.
by the name of Harold Plouffe.
Yeah.
Those two worked for Cliff. So I went in there and I talked to somebody. I said, I want to buy an electric guitar. And they did have what I wanted. And I says, how much? And so but Cliff was there, and I knew him a little bit from, because I had been gone for about 3 years during the war. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give this to you at cost if you play in my band. I said, sure, I wasn't tied up with anybody at that point. So all of a sudden I was a member of the C. Buck Rejuvenators.
But you were also playing on his baseball team. He sponsored our West Side
Oh
team,
yeah,
the
he did
Cowboys.
everything. He sponsored the baseball team, and he had his little band, and he did everything for everybody. And that's how I got started with bands.
And you played with the Night Owls.
For 10 years.
It's a name, here in Morrison County, we hear that name quite often.
Yeah, and we had Don Moldy. I don't know if anybody remember
Yep,
Don.
yep.
And myself are the only two left.
Is Don an accordion player?
Don played accordion
Yeah.
and a quarter box. Yeah.
Yep.
And he can't play anymore. I just saw him the other day. He's got a bad shoulder, and he can't pick that squeeze box up anymore. But Ken Pinkney used to be our band director. He played with us. Al Nornberg was assistant principal. He played with us. The piano player was Lloyd Bozer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he
Bozer
passed
Store.
away.
Yeah.
And
Wally was.
and Wally, and the funniest one was Ted Kiley. He thought the world owed him a living because he was in service. So
Okay.
he's the one that we got such a kick out of him. But anyway, we had a very good band because we could play for anybody. Back then, there was the hit parade. Top 10 tunes, I don't know if anybody remembers that,
Yes,
but they would
yeah.
always pick top 10
Yeah.
tunes.
Yeah.
or add
Every
another
Saturday
one.
there was a
And
radio
we
show.
had,
Yep.
Wally did, we didn't jam, it was all arrangements. And the minute a tune came out, he had the arrangements for all. We had 3 horns, drums, and piano. And most of the dance halls had a piano. Now you don't see them anymore. They bring their own electric and whatever. But back then, and Lloyd played pretty good piano. He was our rhythm section, and myself on the drums, and I picked the horn up once in a while. And depends on our situation. But we had a good band. We played for proms, for weddings, and almost anything that came along.
Now,
Wally was a genius. I
Very
mean,
talented,
making
wasn't he?
arrangements for 3 horns, and that's all in harmony.
Yeah.
And they all had to play by notes. And you
Yeah.
had Pinkney and you had Al Nornberg, and they were both horn players. And
Yeah.
I used to play with them during the week because their normal drummer, his wife didn't want him to be out during the week, so I would fill in for him. I was a lousy drummer, but I could sing, and that was my thing. But
now your
what was-
drumming career started with Bud's band,
yeah, I'll
right?
tell that one.
Okay.
But Wally, they always, during the intermission, they'd have a few drinks and that, and then the dance thing would be over, and we'd put things away, and we'd drive home. Everybody knew that if you sat in the back seat, don't talk to Wally, because Wally, when you said something to Wally, he would turn around, he had to look at you to talk to you. So you didn't dare talk to him from the back seat, but you had to keep him awake, so you had to keep him talking. That was the going home was always a tragedy. I mean, what's his name got your
Lloyd.
Lloyd got nailed when you had a flat tire or something, and you got
No.
hit by a car.
He was
No.
hurt pretty
They
seriously.
they stopped to help somebody.
That was it.
And somebody came and sideswiped him and took both of his legs were very, very bad.
And he suffered with that.
Yeah.
Is
entire
he
life.
still alive? Is
No.
No, he passed
away
away
a couple
about
years
2
ago.
years
He suffered
ago.
all his life with that tragedy where they stopped to help somebody. But you asked about, I'm playing baseball on our park, which is a block away from. Bud comes walking across, and we have a difference as to who it was, but it was one of his band players, the drummer, he said he just up and left. He went to Alaska without telling me or anything. He said, I don't have a drummer, you know. And that was too bad because I was not interested in any of that. And we talked for a little while, and I'm going home, Bud. I'm playing baseball, and he said, but I found a drummer. And he said, yeah, who? He said, you. I had never played drums in my life. The family had rhythm, and that was no problem. So where are we playing that night? 37 acres. The dance floor is huge, and right in the middle where everybody can bang you on the head was where the orchestra sat. I'm sitting in there playing the drums. All my buddies are there because everybody hung out there. That was the real hangout, 37 acres. And I was really having trouble with the rhythm. And the guys would come up and bang me on the head and say, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You talk about inauguration. I think that's why I hated playing for a band after that. Because normally you have a stage like our old junior high, and the drummer hides in the back end. You don't have a problem if you if you drop a stick or something, nobody sees it. But there I was with my face hanging out. They just had a ball taking care of me that night. And Bud, of course, he's in his own world playing his. He doesn't care if the melody's right or not. But speaking of Cliff, he played that the big horn, the what do you call that?
Bass horn.
Bass.
And he played the valve trombone. You
Yeah.
don't see
With
those
that
very
bass
often,
one
but a
with-
trombone that's got fingers on it.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
But with
And,
that oompa, when you played the polkas and that, he
That
could
was a bass
really,
horn,
he could
right.
really roll with that. He was just great.
So, Bodie, you remember 37 Acres?
Yes, I do remember 37 acres on the west end of Green Prairie Fish Lake.
Green Prairie,
Yes,
yeah.
you bet. Yeah, it was quite a hangout, quite a spot for a lot of the military folks out of Camp Ripley. going over there, quite a dance spot in the evenings. I think most days of the week. I can't just remember. Did you fellows play there?
Basically, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
Saturday night, but
Saturday
yeah,
nights, but
they
during
did
the
have
week there were
other
different
things
days
going.
going. But I'd like to tell you,
It was all ages were there.
all ages,
Anybody was
right.
of drinking age, which was 12, I think. Up to
If you could
up
get
to
through the
60.
door,
And there was
right.
always a fight. Did anybody remember the names of those brothers? They were always fighting, and there was a fight, and everybody would go out and watch the fight.
but I'd like to tell you a story about my stint with Cliff Buck is responsible for me getting married.
He is.
We were playing, one of the first few jobs I was playing with the Seabuck and the Rejuvenators was at Piers. And the bandstand was up in the balcony, up high. And everybody, I think we were all single.
Was that the Fun House?
Yeah, in Piers, yeah.
Okay.
Red Bar.
So everybody picks a girl to watch down below, pick one of the prettiest girls. And I spotted this one, very nice looking. And when we had a 15-minute intermission, I went down, asked her to dance. Well, it ended up to be my wife of 60 years yesterday,
Wow.
Dolores.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Congratulations.
And
Great.
his son was married on the same date. And what did they
so we
celebrate?
had and thanks to Cliff Buck that I was in his band, I would have never met her.
And you were best man, Hub?
Yep.
I was best man, yeah. Well, sort of.
But
It was kind of funny because Dolores, his wife, picked her cousin to be my partner, whatever her title was. Bridesmaid, is that what it was?
Maid of honor.
Maid of honor,
and
yes.
she was really promoting this because I was without girlfriend at that time. I never had a girlfriend before that, did I? Did I, Katie? Katie's over here observing, and the party afterward was at our house, and I just my three buddies were running the gas station. My dad loves those guys, and they were running gas. I'm going to go over and visit them and get away from all this stuff. And I went over there, and Bud called over there. He said, "You get back over here. Dolores is crying, and your bridesmaid you're supposed to be taking care of her, and this is my wedding day." And he just chewed me out. I said, "Okay, I got to go, guys." So I go there, and then I got to be friendly with her three brothers. They were all ball players. They said, "Why don't you come out to Genola to a dance out there?" And yeah, so okay, every Saturday we used to go out there. None of us really. Well, Gail danced, and Ollie could dance, but we were more watching people because this was out of our element, and her brothers were always trying to fix us up with girls. It was kind of funny. And so then Dolores finds out that we're going to Genola every week. She says, "Well, I hope he isn't going after my cousin because..." And so I thought, Dolores, I'm getting two messages. When you got married, she was promoting, and now when I'm out there hanging out in her area, she was depromoting. So. But when we were out there, two guys going to get in the fight. Well, the bartender says, "Take it outside." This is December. We had one of those cold rains, and everything was just glare ice. Right. These two guys get out there, fight, fight, fight. Everybody goes out there, and they started swinging each other. They never hit each other, but they almost killed themselves because they would slip and fall down. And it got so funny, everybody was just roaring. It was like going to a movie and seeing the Three Stooges going at it. And finally, the two guys started laughing because they couldn't land a blow. They went inside and bought each other a drink, and that's the stories I remember about the good old days. And that would have been about 48, 49, something like that.
Yeah, in that vein. Yeah.
Bo, did you ever see these guys play? Did you ever go to any of the dances? Do you remember any of them?
I don't remember that I did. Maybe the Night Owls when Bud was playing in the Night Owls, but as the Zibolewskis
We could have played
themselves.
your prom.
Pardon?
We could have played your prom.
You could have, although I don't think you did.
Maybe
They always
I
went
think it
for
was-
the 8 or 10
We had-
big band stuff.
Yeah,
yeah.
we had,
Yeah,
yeah.
'cause you had to dress up and
Yeah,
all
did
that.
you come in a big bus?
No.
Well,
They
one
walked.
for our senior.
From the west side.
You must have,
It wasn't you, fellas.
you must have had money then.
Oh,
Speaking
Guy
of-
DeLeo, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a favorite. He was out of Brainerd, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then was there a Strickland too? Was there a
Strictly, yeah. And he
Strickland?
was out of that area
Yeah,
too.
Don-
They had
Don
the, like
Strickland.
8, 10-piece band. I mean, that was big, huge stuff.
Nothing personal, bud. We just,
You started to say something, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of,
When Bud and I were young, we had Gene Autry, the cowboy. We had the cowboy hat, and we had the whole uniform. And my dad would always get us into something. And I can remember this particular time. It was at the Buckman Hotel, and it was a big fancy dinner. They had 4 forks and all. I'd never seen anything like this. And we were the entertainment. So we had to walk over from the west side, cross that bridge, you're in enemy territory.
Must have
and
been
he's
night.
trying to hide this guitar case. So we got over there, and we were invited to eat with these people. I mean, it was so formal. What fork do I use, and what am I eating? And it was all that kind of thing, and we entertained. But we went there in this dumb costume.
That particular time was at the Buckman Hotel.
That's what I said. Yeah, it was at the Buckman Hotel. You remember that?
Yes,
We
just like yesterday.
Yeah, we were lucky to get home alive. I mean, but that's what our family would go. And the one thing you didn't mention was Dad says we're going to one of the country schools. We're going to entertain at their spring festival or whatever it was.
Right.
They'd auction off a cake. They would have lunch buckets, and people would bid on them, and whoever the woman was that had the thing, then they ate with them. That was the routine in all these schools. We'd get up and entertain.
The teacher's name, there were two Flack sisters, and each one had a country school.
Oh.
And every little doings, they would ask Pa to come home and us to entertain. And I always tell this little story too about Charlie Martin. Wherever we went to these little country schools, Charlie Martin was there doing comedy, reading, and Casey at the Bat.
Casey at the Bat. Would always do
And
that.
so we got to know Charlie real well before he got to be my teacher in high school.
Yeah.
He was a wonderful person.
But to this day, kids will come up to me my age and they say, "Oh, we thought that you guys were from Hollywood." My family would come in, and we were really celebrities as far as they were concerned. I go home and the guy says, "My buddies, there was somebody my age or Bud's age in every house within 4 or 5 blocks."
Sure.
There were just all guys. "Where were you last night?" I said, "I don't know. We got in the car and went with my dad. We had our Gene Autry outfits on." I said, "We went to some country school. I have no idea. We'd auction off a cake. We had a little lunch and we went home." But I always remember that, Gene Autry outfits. And that,
Red shirts and black pants.
yeah. Whatever happened to that?
I don't know. I wish I had them. They would be a souvenir,
Oh,
or a
boy,
collector's
I guess.
item.
well, you were raised in the East Side?
East Sider.
Okay.
yes, right.
So was it that much rivalry between these
Quite
guys
a
on the
bit.
West Side and the East
Yeah.
Side?
There was quite a bit of rivalry. There was actually, except for maybe a ball teams or something, there was very little association among the kids from school to school, unless I think we had a spring get together, and we'd run races,
Yeah.
one school against the other. But really, Gary, there was. If you were an East Sider, that's it. You were an East Sider. You didn't associate with the kids on the West Side.
The only other thing would be we had what do they call it, the recreation center, one on south end, north end, and west side, and we would compete.
In high school, clarify that, you're
Yeah.
right. As you got into high school, of course, things changed a little bit. But as you're in grade school, the ball game was different. High school, we're all in one school in one spot, and we had to get along. So that did change it.
Yeah,
There
it
was a recreation.
gradually went away. They just talk about it these days.
Yeah, but in grade school, there was a Lincoln School on the west side, public school, and there was the Hawthorne up in the north end, Washington, the Central, which is the one I went to, and Columbia down on the south end. So there were 4 different grade schools, public grade schools, and that's where most of the rivalry really came from.
They were all 8th grades too, I think.
Sixth grade. Sixth grade.
The Catholic
Yeah.
schools were the 8th
Yeah,
grade.
we had 8 at Our Lady of Lourdes,
Yeah.
where Hub and I went.
Right, and then and I think St. Aloysius maybe did too.
Oh, yeah.
But
Oh, yeah, they were 8.
But if you're in the public school, then you went to the high school area that's all torn down now. You started there in 7th grade, 7th, 8th, and 9th. You were in junior high.
The small story was I graduated from Our Lady of Lourdes in 8th grade, went over to the junior high, And junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th. And come spring after that 9th grade year, they said we were having graduation. I said, I'm graduating already? I didn't realize that we were graduating from junior high to senior high.
Senior high,
Well, this
yeah.
was the past 4 years.
Yeah.
That's how dumb we are from that school I went to.
That is right.
Well, you know, we're running out of time.
Oh, too bad.
But we have a wealth of things to talk about. Some of the places where you guys used to play. I think everybody has wedding stories where you entertained at that we need to talk about in the future. So, Bud, if you're willing to join us again the next time around, we're going to give you some time to think of some more stories to share. How does that sound?
Very good.
And we should mention that our friend who's not with us, there's normally 5 of us here. Les Saad was not able to join us because of some health difficulties right now, and we hope things get well for him and he can come back and share his
Take care,
stories.
Les.
Because he'd had a lot of stories to share with us.
The musical thing, you know, because
Oh,
he
yes.
was the Darsamo. Darsamo, is that
Yeah.
that weird instrument?
Dulcimer.
He does a
Dulcimer,
lot
yeah.
of charity work.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen him here
Yeah.
and there doing for the
Hopefully he'll
the old
get
folks'
better.
homes and
Right.
hospitals and every place.
Yeah, yeah.
So guys,
So
we
he-
have to do this again.
Hey,
Very
Promise?
yeah.
Promise.
Good deal.
You
All
didn't
right.
get to tell your stories about your business and what do you call that?
We'll get that the next time.
All right. Hey,
We'll
sounds great
talk
to me.
about weddings
I
and
got a
all
whole
the
list,
experiences
a whole
we've
list
had.
of things here that we didn't get to. So
Thanks, guys, and
Yeah,
we'll do this
you.
again. And just a fabulous time in the Little Falls scene. I'm Gary Block, and make sure you join us the next time around.
the day, it's all, folks.